The building itself is the shape of the crown from this this Nigerian statue. If you see the top of it, that is the shape of the building. We saw exhibits that were inclusive of Black history across the continent. I had to put my little Jamaica in there. That's Bob Marley's Rastafari hat. To Maine, where there was an exhibit of Seba Johnson's skis. There is, Muhammad Ali has his a full room exhibit, which is amazing. There's a film of him saying why he did what he did, and it's just, I wanted to end with this one that said, I shook up the world, because the whole, he did, and this whole story, this whole museum itself is shaking up the world. It is bringing to light all the stories that we have not told in a way that's accessible to, from children up to all ages. There is a floor, interactive floor on the second floor where the kids can play all these fantastic computer things. There's half of a car that they can get in, and they can, it's called Drive Into Grandma's House during the time of Jim Crow era. So they can pick a place, enter it into the, move, you know how these things, like a video game, and move things around, and then something will come up and tell them, well, you can't stay here, you need this, or you need to pack this, you have had to have this packed before you go, and that. So there's that, and then there's a genealogy, there's a whole full wall where they can dress people according to the era, the time, this, what clothes. Then there's the genealogy room that they can go to research. I mean, it's beyond belief what that is. And it was packed with children, just playing all these things, just totally. So getting kids aware of the history at an early age and interacting with them on the level that excites them, excites me. And the other part that I don't have the pictures here, but that were really fascinating, was they did a whole section on Black communities, the development of Black communities across the U.S., their success and their destructions. So there was Tulsa, how it bloomed to how it was flattened. There was Oak Bluffs, which is still successful now. Tells the story of the families, what they do to build it up, and how they were able to make a way out of no way at all in creating these towns, despite all the odds that Black people were able to succeed, create a culture, live life, create fantastic writing, fantastic art, etc., etc., etc. Everything we looked at was happening now. Not that we're whipped or all of that, but it was, the history was not the past, it was now. And ways in which we could dialogue about that, was a lot of our thoughts and discussions throughout. Frederick Douglass house was amazing. It was really well worth the trip. And he was an amazing person. I looked at, when we were looking at him, he was like the Oprah of his time. They answered, I think one of the guards said that if you look at anything, he had a lot of pictures of himself in the room, in his house.
Do they realize that that was separate from...
Yeah, that's separate. That's a different place. But I only say that just to bring us the now and then. He had pictures of himself, and the guard said that it was important that he did that, because by being so public that everybody would recognize his face, he couldn't be captured and sold into slavery. That was one of his things, that he wanted to be known everywhere, that he could be seen and recognized at any moment, because it was in the time of the Fugitive Slave Act when he was walking and being so visible.
And he was still a runaway.
And he was still a runaway, right? And he published, when he did his autobiography, he published his name, his full name, and that's when his owners knew where he was.
Yeah,
So-
he also published the names of some of the people that were in his life in slavery, including slave owners,
Yeah, he
overseers,
named
and all that
names.
kind of stuff. He named names, so he was out there at a big risk.
yeah. So the abolitionists told him that it was best if he left the country, and he did for a year, made enough money to come back and buy his freedom.
I'm Shatara Byfield. I'm an intern with Black Heritage Trail, New England now, I guess. Right? New Hampshire or New England?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Soon New England.
Yeah.
Soon the whole world.
Soon the entire world. I was just taken aback by how incredibly huge it was. I didn't know it was going to be such a giant museum, and everything was in such great detail, and just how much time they put into everything and the facts, and just going from slavery all the way up to Obama was just, to see the transition was amazing. And then also I thought we couldn't have gone at a better time with everything that's going on. So I think altogether it was an incredible experience, and I'm really glad I got to go, and I got to go during this time. Some of my favorite things were, I loved the little Ruby Bridges picture, and I loved seeing the artifacts, and there was artifacts from slave ships. There was a weight that they put in there so that they could weigh out, so that it wouldn't sink with all the slaves, because there were so many slaves. I liked, well, it would say the ship, and then it would say how many people were on the ship and how many survived it, which was just to look at the number of lives lost was really just it was so horrible, but also I'm glad I saw it. Just like seeing the hoods of the Ku Klux Klan members and the segregation part, and just all these artifacts. It was incredible. And then the Frederick Douglass house was really cool as well. It was funny. I realized he was a well-known man, but I didn't know he was as famous as he was at his time, and that he was a millionaire, and they were telling he had like his weights in there, and it was how he had a little parlor for people to come and see because he was a celebrity, and he would entertain them there. It was really cool. Yeah.
Don't let me pick on you, just talk.
I have something to say. I was not on the trip, as most of you know. But when you mentioned about the loss of life on the ships, as the captured Africans were being transported to North and South America, I heard recently a woman talking about the ecology of slavery, which is a whole big thing, which I'm not even going to try to get into, but just think about those dead bodies going over the sides of the ships. Not just one day, or 2 days, or a week, but a century. The migration pattern of sharks changed during that period of time.
That's interesting to think about.
There were big walls, like backdrops for certain displays. There was a cabin, an old cabin, that you felt like you could really put things in context. And, the size of the experience of slavery, I think that helped drive it home, how engulfing it must have been. Yeah. In certain interactive displays, you could just tap on one area and then it would offer more info related to it. You know, you just kept on seeing more, you know. With most places, you know, what you see at first is what you get.
I'll go. Hi, I'm Jubilee Byfield. I'm an intern too, and it was such an amazing experience to go to the museum and the Frederick Douglass house. The museum was just like breathtaking and overwhelming at sometimes, because you would just be like, it's so much. And a couple of my favorite ones were Ruby Bridges and her just smiling up, and the guard smiling down at her, and there's this little thing, and the guards were just saying that she was a little soldier throughout the whole entire thing. She didn't cry, not even once. And it's just like this little girl, you know, walking through these white mobs, just like throwing things at her, yelling all these things, and she still like persevered and finished her elementary schooling there. And it was also saying how her grandparents lost their house because of it, her dad lost his job because of it, and her mom couldn't find employment, but she still got her education, and only one teacher agreed to teach her in a separate classroom with no other kids, but she still persevered. And I also really liked Langston Hughes had his big I Too Am America, and I just thought it was really touching for me right now, because everything that's going on in America, and the poem, it's on the wall, and it's like there's still so much that poem has to say about America today, and how so many view African Americans in our country, and how that one day hopefully they'll see all the beauty in not just white people, black people, everyone. And for the Frederick Douglass house, it was really, really cool. It was so he had so much wealth it was just kind of crazy that a slave could like acquire all that, and and his story. And what I thought was really cool in the house too was he had curtains like in all the rooms, but in all the curtains he had a chain and a ball to remind him and remind his guests where he came from. And then what else was really cool was he had a little hut in the back. It was like really, really small, called the Growler. And like when he just needed his own time, he'd go back there and he'd just write for hours and hours. So those are some of my favorite like memories and things I learned about it. Yeah.
I have to head back to work now, just on my lunch
Okay.
break. Hasn't spoken except for Kevin. I guess I'll make a little bit of a shift, just because all the things that everybody have said are it was fun to just hear the review of a lot of the really important things that we saw in that amazing museum. It was absolutely astounding how they put that together with such care and such information and such a variety of ways to look at things and see them. It's something for anybody who wanted to know more, so much more, ever so much more. And to have it all there in that one place. And I understand, and I don't know if it's true, that this was the last property on that mall that it was available. So this is the last one of the big buildings to go up there. And I think it's fitting how long it took to make that happen, and finally it's there. And I just felt so fortunate to be able to go on the trip and to be together with a group of people, many of whom I didn't know at all before, and to sit with various people on our travels and spend some time getting to know a few people better, especially the twins. But others, you know, I mean, I heard a number of wonderful personal stories, which I will never forget, and hope these are people I will continue to see. And an interesting impression, and that was how wonderful it was to be in that museum physically, and how many African Americans probably not all African Americans, but people from everywhere, but mostly black, I would say. I mean, they were way above, they were definitely the majority of people there, just coming in droves to see this. And so difficult to get tickets, individual tickets, apparently. So it was, and so well organized. I mean, we got into lines and to line up after being on the bus, and there were people helping us and answering questions wherever we had a need, and they seemed to have thought about just about everything. It was very, very impressive.
The director said they averaged 17,000 people a day.
Wow.
A day. So there were crowds everywhere. So we were lucky to get in there early in the morning so we could go downstairs, because they say usually the wait to go down is a 3-hour wait in line. So if you go early, head downstairs. If you go late, head upstairs and then go down.
I'm so glad
Or
we
else
did
you're
it
gonna
that way.
or else you're gonna be waiting in line most of the time.
We were about 3 hours, most of us, downstairs.
Yeah, it takes about
First
3 hours to do the first.
Yeah, that was very...
Slavery to emancipation, to the 60s. So it's 3 floors that move you from the story of slavery to the Jim Crow era. There's so much stuff there. Ben Carson was there, by the way. He had a wall.
Oh, on the wall. Oh, that's a good place for it.
Always dealing with the opposites. You just always have to grapple with what that means. And whether it's race, class, gender, sexuality, whatever, you're always face to face if you want to look at it, because it's easy enough not to see if you don't want to. But if you want to be aware in that moment, being in the museum, visiting all these war memorials, the honoring war, and seeing who got awards and who didn't, who was the father for the earth and who were remembered.
But it was actually a bittersweet journey for me, because there's a lot of things. Even though we have made certain progress in certain areas, those things change. They also stayed the same, because there's a lot of comparisons now to what's going on that was going on then. In the slavery days, there were some people who were still able to survive and become successful, whether they were furniture makers, clergymen. We had the whole we had the whole Reconstruction period, which didn't last that long after slavery. But we had senators in office, House of Representatives. Things were going good till they formed the Ku Klux Klan, and they decided to destroy all that by burning houses down and threatening people and killing people and stuff like that. So we were in politics way before the 50s and 60s. So there's a lot of things, but there's everything that had happened was important. There are lesser known figures than the main figures. There's people that people really don't know that much about. Like a good example is Garrett A. Morgan, who was a famous inventor, and because of stuff that he invented, we're able to survive today. Like one thing is the traffic light he invented, with the stop goes up. Because other than that, nobody thought of this except him. People were driving and just bumping into each other. Somebody's going this way, somebody's going this way, somebody's cutting his car off and stuff like that. And there's no signals, so imagine how many accidents occurred.
Yeah.
And he's the only one who had the brilliant idea that, hey, if we put a traffic light here and we got something on this car, then people will know what they're doing. And he also invented the gas mask, which was a patent to the gas mask, which later on became the gas mask, which saved thousands of soldiers' lives, so they were able to breathe in it. He also invented the straightening comb, the hair straightening comb, and created formulas for hair care products and stuff like that. His contribution is numerous, incredible. There's Prince Hall, who started the Black Masons back in the 1700s, which became a meeting place for us to go and talk openly about what was going on with the issues of slavery and or whatever else was going on, stuff like that. So we knew it was a haven where we could discuss things that nobody else could be a parent to. You know, like if it was still part of the slavery time, so the master wasn't in there listening to what we were saying or what we were doing or what we were trying to create. I mean, he figured we was probably sitting in a bunch of spirituals or something, which is another thing. The spirituals weren't really, they were spirituals, but not completely spirituals. They were messages in a song that would tell you if there's an escape, what route to take. Like follow the drinking gourd is to get to that part of the river where you'll see the star, and that will take you up north. So it's like all little clever things. So there's so much joy, but there's so much sorrow.
But I also want to bring it like right here in the circle and say, just as that I think is an amazing structure and site and recording of this amazing history and painful history. I also feel that you and Valerie and Jerry and maybe other people in this room, but from my little experience of each of you, I feel like you are the living museums here in Portsmouth for me. You know, like the all that you feel with that and how that's being exposed and giving people the opportunity. Well, I feel just having, you know, I've been here over 30-something years, but just my little moments of both of you. And my mom's here, and my mom was born in Puerto Rico, so we're a Hispanic culture. But I told my mom, I feel really proud to be in Portsmouth, and one of the reasons I feel proud is because of the African burial ground and how the community came together, maybe not so easily all the time, but we did. But I would love for each of you to just share a couple moments of what you have done in this community. And I know, just asking a little, because I know it's so much, but so that my mom and Maria, who's lived in this community, probably doesn't even know of just how you have influenced Portsmouth and brought the culture of Black history into this community.
I'm going to pass that to Valerie to start, but I want to tell you a little bit about the museum before she starts. It's inclusive all Black history, so there is a part with, you know, the Latino presence. They're in every one of the floors when they talk about stuff. When they talk about the food, when they talk about, you know, the writing, it was not just what was going on here, but it, you know, where the enslaved came, when they came from Africa, where they went, how they came here, and the whole full part of how the writing, and I'm just blanking on names because it's so much, but how those writings and all of that came together to create what we know as Black culture in the U.S.
And let me just share a little my story too. I'm an ex-professional dancer from New York, one of the first Hispanic dance companies called Ballet Hispanico. So exactly what you said, I felt that as a young dancer, because when Tina Ramirez, who founded the company, the reason she created Ballet Hispanico was because there was nowhere for her dancers to go into a dance company with that Hispanic pride existed. So who took us on? Alvin Ailey. He went and helped Tina and said, I'm going to create and give you choreography, because that's how companies rise, and I'm going to take you on. And at that time, the arts in New York City, right, Mom? Everybody helped each other out. You know, like, you know, the Hispanics, the Blacks, Arthur Mitchell, Alvin. I mean, we all came up together, and everybody pulled each other up. And as a young person, I felt very much connected to that community. Exactly what you said, growing up in all, what is it, like not intertangled, but interwoven. We were interwoven. So I would imagine that the museum is like that.
It is totally like that. It's just totally.
I'd like to say something. This is really interesting. I'm happy that I'm here. I came to see Valerie, but before that, I'm a writer, and I did a writing workshop in Chester, Connecticut, and we studied Aretha Franklin. And I tell you, that woman has come up from like there, and she's still going, and she has her courage. I mean, she's been put down, and she rises, and she doesn't care, and she still wants to get paid in cash. She brings some money, and she doesn't, she wants $100 bills still, you know, to this day. She doesn't trust. And one thing she said is, I'm going to tell you, when a white person came to, you know, talk to her, oh, well, how did you get, you know, into this? And she put him in his place. She'd say, I work. I'm a singer, and I sang in a choir in church, and I'm here now. And I'm going to go somewhere, and nobody's going to stop me. And to this day, you see her perform, and she's just amazing. And I love the way the person who did the workshop was saying, she doesn't care who's watching. She puts on whatever she wants. She'll take off whatever she wants. Nobody tells her anything.
She's in charge.
She's herself, and nobody's going to change her. And I love that in her.
Well, that explains a lot. I often wondered who helped her get dressed. I don't always agree with her taste, but you can obviously see she puts on what she wants.
What she wants. She doesn't.
Yeah, good for her.